The city hummed, a constant, low thrum that vibrated through the soles of my shoes and up into my bones. It was a symphony of a million lives, a million stories, all playing out in the neon-drenched canyons of steel and glass. But I wasn't interested in those stories. My business was with the stories we tell ourselves, the ones we polish until they shine, the ones we bury so deep they hope to never see the light of day again. I am a synaptic sculptor, a memory architect, and in a city built on artifice, my craft was in high demand. My studio was a sterile white space, a stark contrast to the chaotic vibrancy of the streets below. Here, memories were not fleeting, intangible things. They were data, streams of code that could be isolated, reshaped, and reimplanted. My clients came to me for a variety of reasons. A jilted lover wanting to erase the sting of betrayal, a corporate drone seeking to implant the confidence of a seasoned executive, a socialite wanting to remember a party she was too inebriated to have actually experienced. I provided a bespoke service, a curated reality. My current client was a man named Mr. Silas, a portly executive with a weak chin and eyes that darted around the room as if he expected the walls to have ears. And in this city, he wasn't entirely wrong. He wanted to remember a recent business deal not as the fumbling, sweaty-palmed affair it had been, but as a masterstroke of negotiation, a triumph of his own making. A simple enough request. I reclined him in the neuro chair, a sleek chrome and leather contraption that was the centerpiece of my studio. The air hissed as the neural interface, a crown of delicate silver filaments, descended and settled onto his temples. On my console, his memories began to bloom, a forest of light and sound. I navigated the labyrinth of his recent past, the towering trees of his professional life, the tangled undergrowth of his personal anxieties. I found the memory he wanted altered, a flickering, chaotic scene in a sterile boardroom. With the deftness of a surgeon, I began to work. I muted the tremor in his voice, sharpened the focus of his gaze, amplified the sycophantic nods of his colleagues. I sculpted his fumbled words into a soliloquy of corporate brilliance. It was a lie, of course, a beautiful, handcrafted lie. But it was the lie he wanted, the lie he was paying handsomely for. As I was putting the final touches on my creation, a strange anomaly flickered across my console. It was a data stream that shouldn't have been there, a ghost in the machine. It was deep, buried beneath layers of mundane recollections, a sliver of darkness in the otherwise placid landscape of Mr. Silas's mind. Curiosity, a trait I usually suppressed in the name of professional detachment, got the better of me. I isolated the stream, magnified it. It wasn't one of Mr. Silas's memories. It was mine. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of fragmented images, a chaotic montage of sensations that were both alien and terrifyingly familiar. I saw a rain-slicked alley, the kind that littered the city's underbelly like varicose veins. The acrid smell of ozone and wet garbage filled my nostrils. The coppery taste of fear was on my tongue. A face, contorted in a silent scream, flashed before my eyes. It was a woman's face, her features obscured by shadows in the driving rain. But her eyes, I could see her eyes, wide with a terror that mirrored my own. A hand, not my own, holding a weapon, a sleek, metallic object that glinted in the intermittent glow of a flickering neon sign. And then a sound, a sickening thud, followed by an all-consuming silence. I gasped, recoiling from the console as if it were a venomous snake. The sterile white of my studio rushed back into focus, the hum of the city a distant, mocking drone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. Sweat beaded on my forehead. What was that? A stray thought? A corrupted file? It felt too real, too visceral. I tried to dismiss it, to bury it back in the digital ether from whence it came, but the memory, if that's what it was resisted. It was a stubborn, unyielding thing, a splinter in the soft tissue of my consciousness. Over the next few days, it festered. The woman's face would flash in my mind at odd moments. The phantom smell of rain and decay would assault my senses. The silence, that profound, deafening silence, would echo in my ears. My work, once a source of detached pride, became a torment. Every mind I entered, every memory I sculpted, felt like a violation. I was a purveyor of false narratives, a weaver of lies. And what if my own life, my own carefully constructed reality, was the biggest lie of all? Sleep offered no respite. The fragmented memory bled into my dreams, morphing into a recurring nightmare. I was a spectator and a participant, a ghost and a killer. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the phantom weight of the weapon in my hand, the woman's silent scream echoing in the hollow chambers of my heart. I knew I couldn't go on like this. The not knowing was a cancer, eating away at my sanity. I had to find out what this memory was, where it came from. My own state-of-the-art equipment, designed to manipulate the memories of others, was useless. The fragment was locked, encrypted with a level of sophistication I had never encountered. It was as if a part of my own mind had been cordoned off, declared a no-go zone. There was only one place to go, one person who might have the skills to pick the lock on my own skull. The thought filled me with a primal dread, a revulsion that coiled in the pit of my stomach. But I was desperate. I had to descend into the city's underbelly, into the black market of memories, a place where identities were stolen, traded, and shattered. I had to find a memory cracker. The descent was a Dantean journey into a world I had only ever observed from the sterile heights of my studio. The neon-drenched streets gave way to a labyrinth of dimly lit alleys and subterranean tunnels. The air grew thick with the stench of synthetic drugs and desperation. Here, memories were a currency, a commodity. You could buy the memory of a first kiss, a lost childhood, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, or you could sell your own, piece by painful piece, until you were nothing more than a hollow shell, a ghost in your own skin. I saw them, the memory addicts, their eyes vacant, their bodies trembling with the aftershocks of a reality that was not their own. They were the casualties of the technology I wielded with such precision, the collateral damage in a war for the soul. A part of me wanted to turn back, to retreat to the safety of my gilded cage, but the woman's face, her silent scream, pushed me forward. I found the memory cracker in a place called The Glitch, a dingy subterranean bar where the patrons looked like they had been cobbled together from spare parts and broken dreams. Her name was Anya, a woman with eyes that seemed to see through the layers of artifice that everyone in this city wore like a second skin. Her hair was a chaotic riot of red and black, and her fingers, stained with ink, and something that looked suspiciously like motor oil, were a blur as they danced across the surface of a cobbled-together console. She was a legend in the underbelly, a digital ghost who could slip past the most sophisticated firewalls, a neurosurgeon who could perform miracles and monstrosities with equal skill. She was also paranoid, volatile, and deeply distrustful of anyone from the world above. I approached her cautiously, the hum of the bar a low, menacing growl. "I need your help," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The help I give usually comes with a price that people like you can't afford, sculptor." The way she said the word, my professional title, was a sneer, a dismissal. "I can pay," I said, my hand instinctively going to the credit chip in my pocket. She finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. "I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about a pound of flesh, a piece of your soul. You sculptors, you play God with people's minds, but you're afraid to get your own hands dirty." "I have a memory," I said, my voice tight with a desperation I could no longer conceal. "It's locked. I can't access it. I think it's important." A flicker of something that might have been interest sparked in her eyes. A locked memory in the mind of a synaptic sculptor. Now that is a delicious irony. She leaned back in her chair, a smirk playing on her lips. "Let me guess, you've been a naughty boy, a little off-the-book sculpting? A memory you weren't supposed to see?" "I don't know," I admitted, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "That's the problem. I need to know." She studied me for a long moment, her gaze so intense it felt like she was peeling back the layers of my consciousness one by one. Finally, she nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "All right,
Sculptor, I'll help you, but not for your credits. I want something more valuable. I want a ghost key." A ghost key? A piece of black market tech that could bypass any security system, open any locked door. It was illegal, dangerous, and incredibly rare. And I knew exactly where to get one. It would mean breaking a dozen laws, risking my career, my reputation, everything I had built. But what was it all worth if it was built on a lie? "Done," I said, the words sealing a pact with a devil in a city of fallen angels. The process was excruciating. Anya's workshop was a chaotic mess of wires, spare parts, and scavenged tech, a stark contrast to the sterile order of my studio. The neuro interface she used was a crude, brutalist contraption that felt like a crown of thorns on my head. She delved into my mind with a recklessness that bordered on violence. It was not the gentle, precise art of sculpting, but the brute force of a demolition. She smashed through the firewalls of my consciousness, tearing down the carefully constructed walls I had built around myself. I was exposed, vulnerable, a raw nerve in the face of her relentless assault. The fragmented memory flickered, fought back. It was a living thing, a parasite that had burrowed deep into my psyche. But Anya was relentless. With a final, agonizing push, she broke through. The world exploded. The rain-slicked alley was no longer a fleeting image, but a fully immersive reality. I could feel the cold, grimy bricks against my back, the sting of the rain on my face. The woman's face was clearer now, her features etched with a desperate, pleading terror. She was saying something, her lips forming words that were lost in the roar of the downpour. And then I saw the weapon in my hand. It wasn't sleek and metallic. It was a neurodisruptor, a device that could shatter a person's mind, leaving them a hollow, empty shell. And I was pointing it at her. A new fragment of the memory surfaced, a piece of the puzzle I didn't know was missing. A voice, cold and clinical in my ear. "Do it, Kalen. It's a loose end we can't afford." Kalen. My name. But it was my voice, my own voice, that answered. "I can't. She's just a researcher. She doesn't know anything." "She knows enough," the voice in my ear insisted. "Do it, or we'll find someone who will, and then you'll be the loose end." The world tilted on its axis. This wasn't a memory of a crime I had committed. It was a memory of a crime I had been part of. A crime I had been forced to witness. "Who are you?" Anya's voice, a distant echo from the world outside my head. "Chronosense," I whispered, the name of the corporation that held a virtual monopoly on memory technology. The corporation I worked for. The corporation that had built its empire on a foundation of secrets and lies. The memory shifted again, the final piece clicking into place. The woman's face, her eyes wide with a dawning horror, not of me, but of something behind me. a third figure in the alley, a shadow that moved with a chilling, predatory grace, the menacing figure from my nightmares. And then, the thud, the silence. Just as the identity of the third figure was about to be revealed, a deafening roar ripped through Anya's workshop. The door burst open, and the room was flooded with a blinding white light. Figures in black tactical gear poured in, their weapons raised. And leading them was the man from my memory, his face no longer obscured by shadows, but illuminated by the harsh glare of their flashlights. He was the head of Chronosense's internal security, a man known only as the Cleaner, and his eyes were locked on me. "Kalen," he said, his voice the same cold, clinical tone from my memory. "You've been a very foolish boy." Anya reacted with the speed of a cornered animal. She slammed a button on her console, and the workshop was plunged into darkness. A surge of electricity arced through the room, sending the Chronosense agents reeling. "Go," she screamed, her voice a beacon in the chaos. "Now." We plunged into the labyrinth of the underbelly, the shouts of the Chronosense agents echoing behind us. We were fugitives now, hunted by the most powerful corporation in the city. And I was no longer just a synaptic sculptor. I was a witness, and the memory I carried was no longer a splinter in my mind, but a ticking bomb that could either save me or get us both killed. The city's hum, once a symphony, was now a funeral dirge, and the story I had to uncover was no longer just my own. It was a story of a conspiracy that reached to the very heart of our curated reality. And I was the only one who could tell it. The city's underbelly, once a place of detached curiosity, was now our sanctuary and our prison. We moved through the labyrinthine tunnels and forgotten sublevels like ghosts, the shouts of Chronosense agents a constant, menacing echo in the distance. Anya, with her intimate knowledge of this subterranean world, was our guide. She knew the secret passages, the hidden bolt holes, the neutral zones where even Chronosense's reach was limited. "They won't stop," she said, her voice a ragged whisper as we huddled in the damp, claustrophobic confines of a decommissioned service conduit. "They have their Cleaner on our trail. He's relentless. He doesn't just find people, he erases them." The Cleaner. The eyes of the man from my memory were a brand on my consciousness. He wasn't just a head of security. He was Chronosense's black hand, the one who buried their secrets, silenced their loose ends. And I was the biggest loose end of all. "What was on that fragment you unlocked?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the dripping of water and the distant hum of the city above. "More than just a memory," she said, her eyes glinting in the gloom. "It was a key to a hidden partition in your own mind, a place where Chronosense stored something they never wanted to see the light of day again." "The woman in the alley," I said, the image of her terrified face seared into my mind. "Her name was Dr. Aris," Anya confirmed, her fingers dancing across the surface of a handheld datapad she had managed to grab before we fled her workshop. "A brilliant neuroscientist. She was working on a project called Project Chimera. I've never heard of it, and in my line of work, that was saying something. I had access to the highest levels of Chronosense's research and development. That's because it was a black project," she explained, her voice low and urgent. "They weren't just sculpting memories, they were creating them, forging entire personalities, implanting them into influential people, politicians, CEOs, journalists, anyone who could shape public opinion, control the flow of information." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It was a conspiracy of such staggering audacity, it was almost unbelievable. Chronosense wasn't just a corporation. It was a shadow government, pulling the strings of society from the sterile confines of their research labs. Dr. Aris found out, I surmised, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with a sickening finality. And you were the one they sent to silence her, Anya finished, her gaze unwavering. But you couldn't do it. You hesitated, and the cleaner had to step in. The shame of it was a leaden weight in my gut. I had been a coward, a pawn in their game. My entire career, my entire identity had been built on a lie, a carefully crafted fiction to cover up a murder. They didn't kill you, Anya continued, her voice softening slightly. They needed your skills, so they did the next best thing. They wiped your memory, buried the truth so deep you would never find it. And they gave you a new one, the memory of a detached, cynical, synaptic sculptor, a man who would never question the ethics of his work, a man who would never look too closely at the shadows. We were no longer just running for our lives, we were fighting for the truth, a truth that could shatter the foundations of the city, a truth that could bring Chronosense to its knees. Our first step was to find a safe haven, a place where we could regroup and plan our next move. Anya knew of a place, a community of renegade data brokers and information activists who lived off the grid
in a place they called the Archive. The Archive was a marvel of scavenged technology and defiant ingenuity. It was a library of forbidden knowledge, a repository of the truths that Chronosense and the other corporate monoliths sought to erase. Here, we found allies, people who had been wronged by Chronosense, people who were willing to fight back. With their help, we began to piece together the full extent of Project Chimera. We found the names of the people whose minds had been violated, the key figures in society who were now nothing more than puppets on Chronosense's strings. The conspiracy was deeper, more insidious than I could have ever imagined. But knowing the truth and proving it were two different things. We needed evidence, hard evidence that would be irrefutable, and that evidence was locked away in the most secure place in the city. Chronosense Tower, a gleaming monument to corporate power and arrogance. The plan was audacious, borderline suicidal. We would infiltrate Chronosense Tower, access their central server, and broadcast the truth to the entire city. It was a David and Goliath scenario, a handful of renegades against a corporate behemoth, but it was our only shot. The night of the infiltration, the city held its breath. The air crackled with a nervous energy, as if the city itself knew that something momentous was about to happen. Anya, with her mastery of digital systems, would be our eyes and ears, guiding us through the tower's labyrinthine security network. I, with my intimate knowledge of Chronosense's inner workings, would be the one to physically access the server. The first part of the infiltration went surprisingly smoothly. Anya, with the grace of a digital phantom, bypassed the tower's initial security layers, creating a window for me to slip inside. I moved through the sterile, deserted corridors of Chronosense Tower like a ghost, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos of the underbelly. But our luck was about to run out. As I approached the central server room, the alarms blared, the corridors were flooded with red light, and a voice I knew too well, echoed through the speakers. "Did you really think it would be that easy, Kalen?" The cleaner's voice was laced with a chilling amusement. "I've been waiting for you." The server room door hissed open, and there he was, the cleaner, flanked by a squad of heavily armed security agents. He was smiling, a cold, predatory smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "It's time to erase you, permanently." But this time, I wasn't the same man who had trembled in that rain-slicked alley. I was no longer a pawn in his game. I was a man who had seen the truth, a man who had nothing left to lose. "You can't erase the truth," I said, my voice steady, resolute. "The truth is what I say it is," he sneered. The firefight was a blur of motion and sound. The renegades from the archive who had been our backup engaged the Chronosense agents, creating a diversion. In the ensuing chaos, I made a break for the server console. The cleaner was on me in an instant, his movements a blur of deadly precision. We were no longer just a corporate enforcer and a synaptic sculptor. We were two sides of the same coin, two products of the same corrupt system. He was the lie, and I was the truth. The fight was brutal, primal. It was a battle not just for our lives, but for the soul of the city. He was stronger, faster, a trained killer. But I had something he didn't. I had a purpose. With a final desperate surge of adrenaline, I managed to incapacitate him, just as Anya's voice crackled in my ear. "Now, Kalen, now!" I slammed my hand on the console, and the broadcast began, the unaltered memory of Dr. Aris's murder, the evidence of Project Chimera, the names of the puppets, the full, unvarnished truth flooded the city's data streams. It was on every screen, on every device, a digital tidal wave that could not be stopped. The public outcry was immediate, a roar of collective outrage that shook the city to its core. Chronosense, the untouchable monolith, began to crumble. Its stock plummeted, its executives were arrested, its puppets were exposed. The city, for the first time in a long time, was awake. In the aftermath, the city was a different place. The neon lights still shone, the hum of 1,000,000 lives still filled the air. But something had changed. The artifice was stripped away, and for the first time, people were seeing the world, and themselves, with clear eyes. Anya and I, now partners in a new kind of business, a business of truth, looked out at the city from the window of our new, much less sterile, workshop. The future was uncertain. The fight was far from over. But we had a new purpose. We were no longer just a memory cracker and a synaptic sculptor. We were guardians of the truth, architects of a new reality, a reality built not on lies, but on the messy, complicated, and beautiful truth of what it means to be human. The city still had its stories, but now they were stories that were waiting to be told, not sculpted. And we were ready to listen.